So let me just go through this really quickly. This is really cool because the city council went through a section to talk about legislation that they support. And the thing that's interesting is the majority of these items of legislation were all done in the consent calendar. Now, you know what the consent calendar is. That means they're not going to talk about it, right, unless someone raises the issue. So let's just go through these real quickly and the last one is for comic relief, I think. You'll see it when we get to it. Anyway, this is AB 916. It prohibits local governments from conducting a public hearing as a condition of approving a project. So, in other words, it just means that it doesn't mean that you can't have a public hearing, but it means that you cannot put that as a rule for every single project where you're adding additional bedrooms or configures a different existing space to increase bedroom count within the house. And I think it's interesting because anybody here have ever done a fairly major remodel? I did one where I added a whole 242 square feet. And when I did that, I had to go to the school board. Why? Because they wanted to make sure I wasn't adding a bedroom. And then I had to go to the water company to get them to sign off because they wanted to make sure I wasn't adding a bathroom. Crazy. So anyway, the recommended action was to oppose the bill because it takes away their authority. All right, so if they want to, they believe that they should have a public hearing for every one of those issues. I don't know why. Then there's a bill 1597. It reinstates the prosecution authority to change someone with a felony imprisonment for up to 3 years if they have been previously convicted 3 or more times of petty theft, shoplifting, grand theft, burglary, auto theft. You know what? I'm all for that because, like I said, we turn around and we see all the time on the news. This guy gets arrested, and then you see his rap sheet, and the rap sheet's got 12 or 13 or 14 arrests and convictions. And you go, why is he out there free? Well, in this case, they decided to support the bill. Then there was one, and this is the one that I talked about earlier. This is Assembly Bill 1599, which repeals Proposition 47, except for the provisions related to reducing the penalty for possession of concealed cannabis. So it's the one that says, okay, what used to be a felony will be a felony again, but then of course it means that our legal system has got to prosecute it. But in fact, it's a rollback. Now, I think that's interesting because Proposition 47 was voted on by the people, right? So here, all of a sudden, I think it's interesting when we talk about it. Now, if you have something that is voted on by the people, we know that the court system can overrule it by declaring it unconstitutional or in conflict with some existing law. But now the legislature can also repeal it, so why are we voting on this stuff in the first place? Recommended action was supported, and because Proposition 47 reduced penalties for things like grand theft, shoplifting, receiving stolen goods, writing bad checks, and drug possession. And then they were supporting it because they claimed, well, crime is going up. This is one of the big reasons. I agree with them. This is Assembly Bill 1603, which just amends Proposition 47 by reducing the threshold amount for petty theft from $950 to $400. Now, if you remember, it was down there before, and then Proposition 47 raised it to $950 so that there'd be less people prosecuted for petty theft. And their recommended action was to support it. And then there is a state resolution. Now, that's not a law. It's a resolution. It's like when the city council passes a resolution. And it declares the state of emergency proclaimed by governor, this must be COVID, on March of 2020, is at an end. Thereby, they want to strip him of the emergency powers that he currently has. and the recommended action was to support it. Then this is because a bill that was passed by the legislature takes effect January 1st. It's the one about how you're going to dispose of food waste. Don't put it in trash anymore. Don't want to go to the landfill. As I recall, landfills now take the methane gas produced in the landfill and use it to generate power for the landfill operation. So they don't want that anymore. So the city said, we're going to tell them we're going to comply with it because we're too afraid to tell them we're not. That's my judgment. This has to do with SB 1383, which was signed into law by Governor Brown, and that targets the methane emission reduction by the state reducing landfill disposition of organic waste. So now, I guess supermarkets will no longer be able to throw it in the dumpster, so it's the end of dumpster diving. Right? It's the end of dumpster diving, right? You're not going to be able to dumpster dive if they don't throw it in there. And it requires us to adopt regulations to achieve the goal, and of course doesn't give us any money to do it, so it's another unfunded mandate, and then gives California Recycle, as far as I know, that's not an elected board, that's just a board of appointed bureaucrats, the ability to come and fine you if you don't comply.
That's the compost one?
Huh?
That's the compost?
Yeah.
They're passed, but there's no process to it. You can compost at home and get those little bins, but where do you put it?
Well, this is what I thought was comic relief at the end of this whole meeting, because then they had a public hearing. Realize everything up to what I just talked about was on the consent calendar. So they all said, yeah, and it went through. They didn't really talk much about most of it. But this was a public hearing. And what it was is it would allow land use and zoning laws to override conflicting state laws. So this is a hearing where someone is proposing a law that would say that if a local municipality generates some land use laws and the state generates some conflicting laws, then the local laws should take precedent. Exactly the opposite of the way it is today. Okay? So I asked a question. I said, well, wait a minute. Didn't you tell me that you couldn't do anything about mandates because of the state laws? Why don't you add health care or health issues to this as well? Why doesn't your local, and they say, oh, well, we can't do that. And by the way, we're not doing this. Someone else is generating this, not us. But we support it because it gives us more authority. Okay? Well, that's nice. So if passed, it would create a constitutional amendment. Understand the California Constitution is not like the United States Constitution. The California Constitution is just all of the laws that are passed by the California legislature. And so it would create an amendment that said that city and county land use and zoning laws would supersede conflicting state laws, with the exception of certain circumstances. And of course, they wanted to consider this position because since this is a public hearing, it's going to come back again for a final vote. But I just thought it was amusing because, wait a minute, you're telling me in all these other situations you can't do anything, but now in land use you want to? And I think for the most part, this is to help developers.